Hi, everyone. Today we're speaking to Christina Warner. She is the force behind Ruby's Law in the UK, which adds the ability to protect and find shelter for animals of domestic violence victims. Please listen to this powerful conversation today. It will really knock your shoes off. I'm hoping that by next week, which will be March 25th, that I can put in the show notes that Ruby's Law has passed. So now let's hear what Christina and I talked about. Hi, I'm Deborah Hamilton. Welcome to my podcast, Why Do Pets Matter? 10 years ago, with my iPhone and a script, I recorded the first episode of the Ultimate Pet Resolution Summit, which chatted with experts about conflicts over animals. Our conversations were intimate, honest, and illustrated how disagreements over animals occur and how those disagreements can reshape people's lives and relationships. In November 2019, I started Why Do Pets Matter, a new podcast that continued these informative discussions. I'm so excited to have you here with me, continuing my exploration into a more meaningful conversation about why pets matter to all of us. My guests and I will share ideas, stories, and experiences straight from the heart, unscripted and holistic. From the bravest moments to the most brokenhearted, we will explore how to resolve disagreements over animals differently. One thing I know for sure is I want to have more meaningful conversations that will help all of us unlock that deeply felt human-animal bond that drives the emotions of conflict. Hi, it's Deborah Hamilton, and I'm here with my new, very good friend, Christina Warner. She is the head of and the guiding light for Ruby's Law. Christina, tell everybody about what you're doing and how you're doing it, and then we'll ask you the question that we ask everyone.
Of course. Yes, I am Christina Warner. I'm a family barrister. So that's the one that wears the wig and gown in England. I'm based in London, and I am the founder of Ruby's Law. That's a campaign to change family law legislation to ensure that pets are protected from domestic abuse.
I love that. You know, before we got on this podcast, I had just had a New York State Bar Association meeting, and we're talking about domestic violence and protecting pets and having the ability to leave. So it's like so important. So before we get into all of that wonderful information, I'd like you to go back and talk to us about why do pets matter to you?
Because they deserve to be protected from domestic abuse, because they are victims too.
And where did you start that? How did you get involved in that? Because, you know, it's not like as young kids we even know about animals being harmed in a difficult situation. How did it come about?
It really came about from my practice at the family bar. So I specialise in cases involving domestic abuse that have got that dynamic within them. And there are a few instances where a companion animal, or I'll call them a pet, a companion animal had been caught in the crosshairs of the breakdown of that relationship. So I had an instance, it became more common, or maybe I'd become more attuned to hearing what was taking place, that these animals were either being used as leverage against the victims, they were being used as tools of controlling and coercive behaviour, or in fact they were becoming primary victims of direct victims of abuse rather than by proxy through the human counterpart, through the human victim counterpart. And when I would make an application at court for a protective order, an injunction to try and safeguard my victim client, the judge would rightly point out to me, where in the legislation is there anything to say that I, as the judge, have an obligation to consider the welfare of the pet? And the judge was absolutely correct. There is nothing in the legislation that underpins domestic abuse in the family courts of England and Wales that forces the hand of the judiciary to consider the welfare or in fact safeguard a companion animal. And at that point, I just thought to myself, this is something needs to be done. But it really stemmed from, it was a case of, I think, of the planets aligning a little bit for me, because there were two throughout, I've been talking about this about 12 years, my career. I was a solicitor and then I cross-qualified as a barrister. And I remember talking about this when I was a little baby paralegal, working away at a law firm, sending faxes back in those days.
Oh, faxes. Yes, faxes. We're dating ourselves.
Faxes, yeah, franking post, putting it through the post machine. See, I'm giving away my age now, a long old time.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you, though. We had Selectrix. And we used to, check things up and nothing was in a computer. Oh my goodness. Yes.
Exactly. Everything was sent off via post. So even at that time, I would raise, why are pets not considered? And I'd always get the pat on the head. Oh, aren't you cute worrying about pets? And worrying about
people.
Worry about the real victims. Worry about the women and children. Well, that's a very heteronormative, very generic way of thinking about domestic abuse. So as I've gone into my career, it really was over the past few years that I've been more attuned to, it was really two particular legal incidences, if you will, that triggered for me, I have to do something about this. And the first was the Animal Sentience Act in the UK, which in itself isn't a freestanding piece of legislation in terms of underpinning policy. But what it does is it assists with policymakers and it guides them when it comes to animal welfare. They have to acknowledge, and it is acknowledged within the Animal Sentience Act, that animals are capable of feeling pain, fear, joy. So that's really, it adds flavour to any legislation that policymakers in England and Wales are planning on putting together when considering animals. And the second part was listening to the United Nations General Comment 26, which was initially to do with environment and climate change and the impact on children, that children have a right to a clean, safe environment that isn't detrimental to their health or well-being. And that can include air pollution, light pollution, access to clean water. Something that was mentioned in that general comment was that children cannot be witness to the abuse of animals, either on a level in terms of customary or traditional. So for instance, the traditional sacrifice of animals, bullfighting, but also in the household. Children cannot be witness to domestic abuse in the household. And it was those two things to me that came about. And I thought, if I'm not listening to the messages that are being sent to me, then obviously I'm not listening at all. And it was as a result of that in January, 2 months ago, 2 months from the date of today's podcast, that I launched Ruby's Law, seeking to change family law legislation, the Family Law Act 1996, to change it to include pets to be considered within the making of these urgent orders. And I think, and the rest, as they say, is history.
And, it's so interesting to us. It seems so logical. And yet it took until, so in the United States, we've had a few states pass laws where pets can be part of temporary restraining orders, but not all states, just a few.
I think it's California and Maine, isn't it, Deborah? I think
both and New York. I think New York has one too, right? So there's a few. I will find out and put it in the notes how many states in the United States have the ability for someone to have a temporary restraining order. And we always talk about the dogs and cats, but I've had clients who've had horses. And, when you're a subject of domestic violence and you have large animals like horses who are also incredibly fragile, right?
Of course.
I mean, how do you talk about, I loved when you said, there's that control. How do you leave that environment if your life is in danger and leave your horses behind?
Well, so essentially in the UK, or the aim of Ruby's Law is to consider companion animals. So that's your cats, dogs.
Oh, I know that.
Small so it's usually your hamsters, your guinea pigs, and your mice. But a very important point about Ruby's Law is that despite her three primary objectives, there's inevitably going to be auxiliary consequences that come about where obviously naturally you implement new legislation or amendments to current legislation. There's then a spider web effect, obviously.
Oh, absolutely.
Statutes. That's just how the law works, the magical way that the law works. And with Ruby's Law, when it comes to horses, I was actually speaking to a vet, a very highly accomplished vet, and he's been fantastic. We're having this debate, and he was saying that Ruby's Law will go a long way to help people that live in rural areas who have horses or animals that are technically outdoor animals because they don't live within the house, but they're not within the category of companion animals. It will also help them because the burden of proof in terms of whether or not an animal has been abused or whether or not there was a need and the welfare issue. I'll give you an example. If a horse is shot and someone says the horse was lame and therefore I shot the horse, but out of mercy for the animal.
Right.
If that's what the perpetrator says, but the victim says, no, that was my beloved horse. Perpetrator knew I adored this horse. There was nothing wrong with the horse. they did it deliberately because they knew it would hurt me and keep me in the state of fear. Ruby's Law would directly affect that. Although that's not her primary, one of the three primary objectives of Ruby's Law, it will inevitably help in that scenario as well, where we've got pets that have got that sense, you've got that link and that bond with them, but they technically don't live within the household or are companion animals, your cats and your dogs and small furries. Horses will also be considered. The same to a certain extent, reptile animals.
Yeah.
So your reptiles and your exotic birds, they will also be considered by Ruby's Law as well. Although technically there is some argument, there's some debate to be had as to their status as to companion animals. The way we've worded it is cared for animal.
Yeah.
So exactly, if a human has carriage of taking care of that animal, Ruby's Law will help.
I love that, because in the United States, we also have 7 states that have passed the judges deciding best interest or well-being in divorce, where the pet would go, right? And I have a whole opinion on that, because I'd really like you to go to mediation, because actually your pet doesn't hate your ex and there's no domestic violence involved, but your pet would go to the other person if you weren't home. So let's try to talk about this and see what would be best for the pet. But I loved when you said the spider web of laws and legislation, because now it was supposed to be only for divorce, so legal marriages and the process of divorce, but relationship breakups and, same-sex relationship, everything has under that web. And even say you found a dog and things like that, and you've taken care of it for a year and a half. Well, they're going to use that best interest. They're going to drag it out of, domestic relations and bring it into, property. So it's really something that has, I think, and I don't know how you feel, I'd love to hear your thoughts. It's come out of the recognition, thank God, in the last, not when we were using faxes, so that would be in the 90s. It's funny that it's numbered 1996, because this would so far out of our brain in 1996. But it was when the human animal bond, anyone who ever had a pet always knew that that pet made them feel better. Their heart rate would go down. But now we have all of these studies and brilliant people writing books about the human animal bond and its benefit for people. So I think that's why the law has enabled you to create this concrete way of recognizing the human animal bond.
Yeah. And I think, obviously, as you know, the more we learn about the human animal bond, the more we learn about how it can be exploited.
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah. So it's an unfortunate natural progression. But the more we learn about how animals, the role they play to us and how beneficial they are to us, the more we learn about how perpetrators will use them as leverage to keep the victim in their control, or that actually target the animal as a primary victim of that abuse. Because something else that's never been acknowledged in the UK is that pets can actually be victims themselves as freestanding, rather than by proxy through the human victim, which is frustrating, because if an animal is harmed by the perpetrator, that animal is a victim of domestic abuse. We can't expect them to wait to harm the human victim and then the companion animal becomes a victim. They should be acknowledged as being having the capacity to be freestanding victims. Why? Because we know the Animal Sentience Act tells us that animals are capable of feeling pain, fear, joy, etc. So if they have the capacity to feel that, they have the capacity to feel the pain that's inflicted by virtue of domestic abuse.
Right. I mean, they're watching it. It's like a child. I mean, they may be able to articulate it to us, but I know that when we raise our voices, and I'm sure when you raise your voices, the dogs are alert. Some of them leave rooms, some of them. Now, you're not harming them. You're probably just talking very
like
your significant other.
Yeah. You can. I know with my cats, if I'm on a phone call and I'm even if
animated.
If the reception is poor, let's say, and can you hear me? Can you hear me? My cats get very upset. They put the paw on the leg. Calm down now. They obviously can feel the blood pressure, and this is what breaks my heart, that they're so loyal. They're so loving that they will stay with us regardless. And that's what gets to me, because they deserve to be protected. They deserve to be acknowledged because of how much we benefit from them. It's almost our obligation to ensure that they're acknowledged and protected.
It is so important. And it's interesting you say that, because that is the piece that most lawyers here in the United States don't get. You know, the reason I get up every day, and sometimes the reason that anyone gets up every day, is because they have a pet they have to care for.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And we know as well, because we were actually having a look with our research team, we were having a look at communities with particular needs, particular vulnerabilities that would benefit from Ruby's Law. The list, Deborah, is endless. Older people, senior citizens would benefit, because
Elder abuse.
exactly, we know that a lot of them, for the sake of socialization, for the sake of routine, once they're in retirement in their twilight years, they might have a doggy, they might have a cat that gives them that routine. Elder, senior citizens, they would benefit. Migrant individuals would also benefit, because if their immigration status is in a state of flux, they may have invested all of their routine into a companion animal. It may be all that they're getting up for, as you said. They would benefit. LGBTQ plus individuals, many of them are choosing to take companion animals, a fur baby phenomenon, rather than have children. They would benefit as well. Homeless individuals as well, because there's a lot of talk at the moment about homeless individuals, especially with the cost of living skyrocketing in the UK, especially in urban areas like London, where homeless individuals have dogs. The sense of companionship, it would assist them, as veterans as well, coming back from tours abroad. There may be PTSD, or what's most close to my heart is disabled individuals.
Oh, yeah.
Disabled individuals that are dependent on therapy animals or guide dogs. This would be pivotal for them, especially because perpetrators know, in order to maintain their independence, disabled individuals will be dependent on their animal. Say if you're partially sighted or blind, your guide dog, if the perpetrator targets the animal, it's game over for the individual's independence. So Ruby's Law would really help with all of that. No one loses, apart from the perpetrator, as they should.
Is there I would hope, and maybe it'll come, that there would be even a stronger punishment, so to speak, for harming a trained service animal, for a blind person or a PTSD, or a dog that's been trained to alert for epilepsy or diabetes, or that would be. So not only am I living in a really pretty bad situation, but I have diabetes or I have epilepsy, and I have this dog that alerts, has been trained to alert, and they're threatening that dog. So not only are they threatening me and my life, but they're threatening me and my life through my dog.
Exactly. What we're hoping, and I can see, because I used to practice crime for a good long while. I was a prosecutor for years. What I envisage as an auxiliary outcome, although not a primary objective for Ruby, because we really want to focus on and home in on family.
At a time. Yeah.
What we envisage as being the auxiliary outcomes for Ruby's Law is that inevitably there will be an increase in the sentences that are handed down in the criminal courts, because a non-molestation order, which is the injunction that's made at the family courts, if that has a pet encompassed within it, you breach that, you could face a criminal penalty for abusing, threatening the animal, threatening to take the animal away from the owner that's been assigned, the guardian that's been assigned. So it's inevitably going to have runoff in the criminal courts as well. This isn't a single jurisdiction issue.
Yeah, because I was an assistant district attorney as well. And so the arms, the tentacles can reach not just for domestic violence. And ironically, when I put together the plan about making a plan for your pet, right, we had 8 Ds and we didn't have domestic violence. Now we do. Because quite frankly, if you're in the middle of a domestic violent situation, having the ability to make a plan and find friends and be able to do it, because what kind of organizational support, shelters, things like that have come on board. So Ruby's Law is going to be passed, and it's going to become the law of the land in the UK. I'm sending all my angels over there.
Thank you.
what are the prospects for people who are in that kind of a situation? Because here in the United States, finding lodging, right? I'm leaving. I'm taking kids and the dog and the parakeet with me. What's the lodging situation? Has that been worked out yet? Because that's the sticky wicket. And I know that Purina over here has Purple Leash. So I don't know if Purple Leash might come over, UK Purple Leash, or maybe one of the UK dog foods.
So we've got various fostering and refuge placements, but obviously the funding's been cut to the bone.
Oh,
That's
please.
the problem. So it's a disproportionate demand placed, and
Right.
these programs are phenomenal. Some of them are freestanding programs, so all they deal with is fostering, taking care of pets in that transitional stage whilst the human is trying to get away from whilst the victim is trying to get away from the perpetrator. But some of them are bolt-ons, or they are programs affiliated to a pre-existing charity. But obviously, the need is vastly outweighed. Sorry, the placements that are available are vastly outweighed by the need that's placed on them. And these people are so committed. They're wonderful and amazing people, but they simply don't have the capacity or the support, the funding that's needed to be able to help everyone that needs it. So I'm hoping with Ruby's Law, it will force the hand of government to reevaluate the contributions and the distribution of funding to these programs so that there is enough there to be able to meet that demand.
Well, hopefully also, like we did here, Purple Leash was actually an independent group that Purina picked up to sponsor.
Right, right.
So maybe Ruby's Law will then have Ruby's Leash or something like that. Which
really
will
nice.
create, I mean, I like purple leashes and ruby leashes. But
yeah, great colors.
Yeah, it's great colors together, really a statement. But finding, I mean, maybe the Royal Vet College or something like that, because I'm always looking for the ability. I know that you probably know Phil Arkow of violence against animals, elderly, domestic violence, and child abuse, all are connected. And I'll send you the link, and I'll put the link in the show notes. I can't believe I can't remember it because it's like on the top of my tongue, and it'll come to my brain. But he has done study after study after study here in the United States, linking all of those. And the pets are always on the short end of the stick, which is why Ruby is so important.
Always, they always are, and we know, well, just some statistics. We know that in 90% of cases where there's a pet in the household and domestic abuse is reported, 90% of those cases the animal's been abused, and 12% the animal's been killed. So the statistics are there, the statistics are clear, and we need to acknowledge it. It needs to be reflected in legislation. Legislation flexes, bends and moves according to society, and it's about time that we acknowledge the roles that companion animals play in our lives, because they deserve it. They deserve to be acknowledged, and they deserve to be protected by the family courts, not just in the criminal courts. It's essential, I would say, both for the human and for the pet themselves.
In this day and age, they keep us alive, and hopefully we keep them alive. And I always say I'm heavily involved with the National Dog Show Therapy Dog Symposium, and their biggest push is to make sure you read your dog. Don't put your dog in a situation. So it's sort of like, yeah, you've got this therapy dog that's going to help people, and it's wonderful, but remember, it's all about the dog. So I think that's Ruby's Law. It's all about understanding that we need to create protection for the pets that are giving us their all when they're in a situation that has become dangerous to the human and the animal.
Exactly. And then obviously when we deal with I wouldn't say they're satellite issues, they're primary issues, really. If we've got a child involved in that dynamic, surely this goes to the heart of child welfare, child safety and child welfare. And that's something, those are applications that I've made in court before, and the judges have clearly said, but there's nothing within statute that says I have an obligation as the judge hearing this case to consider the welfare of the child. And I said, well, we'll anchor it to the welfare of, the welfare of the animal. We'll anchor it to the welfare of the child, because the courts in family, the family courts in England and Wales.
There is the law about children not being able to see that.
Exactly. With the United Nations, the general comment, they were very clear. Children cannot be witness to this. Right. We've got an obligation that they cannot.
England hasn't codified that.
No, it's not coded. Well, it's a general comment. So it's the United Nations are kind of giving us a nudge. But but we should acknowledge it makes sense. We should acknowledge it. And I wonder whether or not, especially when it comes to the Convention of Rights of the Child, I wonder whether or not the United Nations will then have that codified within the CRC.
I am so grateful to get this on just at the cusp. You'll have to come back and let us know.
I will.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Deborah, please. We keep cutting each other off.
No, we're just two peas in a pod, because both of us understand the huge ramifications of passing this law. What do you think the chances are? Have you done a number count? How do laws get passed there?
So we're hoping for a private members bill, but on Tuesday we are the issue being debated in what's called an all-party parliamentary group. Animal welfare is they're the ones that have brought this forward. So there are subsections of cross-party interest. So I'm hoping, we've got MPs at the moment, so we've got members of parliament from Labour that are very, very keen. And we've also got some Conservative members of parliament as well. So if Ruby can get cross-parliamentary support, that goes a long, long way. And it may be, I think the best way is going to be a private members bill. So that will be a member of parliament who isn't currently a member of government. They will put it forward as being an amendment to current legislation. Because we're not asking for new legislation, we're asking for the Family Law Act to be amended to reflect the protection of pets. So we're not asking.
They did with the divorce. Yeah, that's what they did with the divorce. They just amended it. They just added 5C or something wherever.
Exactly.
That's all you're doing is adding 5C.
Exactly. Essentially, there's subsections that we want to, and obviously procedurally they'd need to change some bits and pieces because there'd be different bodies that would need to be notified about an animal being protected and what the police and law enforcement should do as well. And animal protection, so it does have knock-on effects, but we're not asking for a freestanding piece of legislation. Like, for instance, recently there was legislation passed last year about pet abduction and pet theft. So that's that's almost a more recent societal phenomenon that came about as a result of COVID. We're not asking for that. We're asking for amendments to existing legislation. That's almost
right, because it could fall under domestic relations.
Yeah. So it's so that's what we're hoping for. I'll be the keynote. I'll be on the panel speaking with other individuals that are experts. They're either experts in animal abuse or they're experts from the veterinary field. And obviously I'll be making the case for all MPs to get on board for Ruby's Law, and fingers crossed, if we get some cross-parliamentary support, it will make things a lot easier.
Well, you need to tell them that most people who are voting love animals.
I agree. And I think the UK is known as a nation of animal lovers, but I think with that comes a dark reality where we've got such a love of animals, as we mentioned before. There's an ability to exploit that bond. Right. So I think that's even more, we may love animals.
That's what they need to go on. They love animals, and they need to stop that one niggling issue that keeps raising its ugly head, is that bond, that love is what's being exploited. And don't you want to help me? Reelect me because I voted for Ruby's Law. Reelect me because I voted for Ruby's Law because
exactly. Well, I would say as well that Ruby's Law, we know that domestic abuse doesn't discriminate when it comes to gender, age, sexual orientation, race, economic background. Ruby's Law highlights it no longer discriminates when it comes to species.
I actually had a colleague when I was an attorney at the police department whose wife gave his dog away while he was at work.
Yeah, or I've known of a case, a vet actually told me that he was asked to euthanize a dog and he suspected there was an abusive dynamic there, and he refused to do it. It was because there was nothing wrong with the dog. And when he insisted, well, I'll take the dog off you, put it into a foster home and rehome. No, the dog has to be put down. Yeah. There's nothing, this is a perfectly, a
healthy dog. Yeah,
healthy dog.
And can we call Sue and ask Sue what she thinks?
No, don't call her. She doesn't know. She doesn't want the dog. Well, give me the dog and I'll take the dog in, and the dog will make a lovely companion for another household. No, the dog has to be put down. These are the things that we need to stop because, it's been a long time coming. And
so I'm glad you brought that up, because we just had a member meeting here in the United States at the American Veterinary Medical Law Association, which everyone should join if you're a lawyer and you're a veterinarian in the United States or anywhere else.
Agree.
But we were talking about the required reporter. The dog comes in. Do you have required reporters in veterinary medicine now?
So in the UK, it's quite difficult, and I don't know how much I can speak on it because it's really down to vets.
Oh no, I just was asking because it's very difficult here too, because they don't have enough education to know. I mean, they could say the dog was in bad shape because it's thin or it's dehydrated or it has 3 broken legs in a year or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Clearly the dog is accident prone. I don't know. But it's hard for them because they're afraid of alienating a client. They're afraid there's so many wheels in that cog.
And I think as well, one of the major issues in the UK is that vets don't have bilateral data sharing. So you can then cherry pick if you don't like Mr. Smith's vet, you can go to Mr. Jones, or you can go to Mr. Patel. So you can go to all the different vets you want because they don't have bilateral data sharing for because of GDPR requirements. That becomes very difficult because if a vet has concerns that the individual,
they'll just leave him and go to another vet, and it'll start all over again.
They can't undertake any due diligence. Obviously, that will be a knock-on effect of Ruby's Law. That's not a primary objective, and I'm sure another lawyer somewhere along the line.
That might be one of those spider little.
Yeah, it could be a spider web. It could be a vet brings it up and it becomes Tabby's law, or it becomes, whoever's law. It will become a different campaign. But I'm hoping certainly Ruby's Law is sparking a debate on that issue because vets need to have some kind of a network in place to be able to share that information if they have suspicions. But at the moment, there isn't any because all the information obviously is gate-kept for confidentiality obligations.
It's the same here in the United States. Yeah, I mean, we can ask for our records. They go with us to the different vets. But would I ask for my record if I think the vet is going to?
Exactly.
Yeah. So the vets, the records can be shared if they're requested by the client, but they cannot be shared among vets. So just to clarify for all of our non-lawyers who are and veterinarians who are here, yes, they can. So what is the one thing that is the most important for you about why pets matter and probably Ruby's Law? What is the greatest gift you're receiving because of this? Because the passion is palpable, and I'm so glad we had time to bring this forward before it happens and hopefully chat with you afterwards. And please feel free to send me any links I can include so people can follow along as well.
Absolutely. What's the greatest gift I've received from Ruby? I think it's, do you know what I think it is, Deborah? I think it's people realizing that they were either the victim of controlling and coercive behavior by virtue of their ex-partner's conduct with that animal, or the kind of the light bulb moment where they think, oh yeah, I remember when I had to put all of my earnings into my ex-partner's account and they wouldn't give me money to be able to buy dog food and the dog starved, that type of thing. Or, I
had to give him my dinner.
Exactly. Or I remember when I needed to take the cat. It was an inconvenience to the perpetrator that I had a cat and the cat would always sit with me, and the perpetrator, typical narcissist, the perpetrator would be very aggressive towards me when the pet would show me attention. That type of thing. It's making people think and it's prompting dialogue. And that's what this is about. And the more that the further in, we're now almost 2 months to the day. It'll be 2 months tomorrow on the 21st of March. That Ruby's Law has been in existence, that she's been fully realized as a campaign.
And what a great way to honor her.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, and as I say, Ruby was a little Persian, and like that Shakespearean expression, she may be small, but she is mighty. And that's exactly what she is.
I love it. I love it. And if you have any pictures of Ruby, please forward them. So
absolutely. I'll send them to you. She was, the story that she's telling and the fact that I think she embodies all of the animals that have been lost to domestic abuse, I think is really telling.
It is. It's amazing. I am so glad you came today. Thank you so much, Christina. Can people, follow you on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. I'll send you all the bits and pieces. Yeah. Perfect. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. We're on Blue Sky. I'll send you the whole lot, Deborah. Don't worry. I've got a whole long list of all these social. I'll send you some pictures. Did I send you the logo? I'm not sure if I sent you the logo.
I don't think it will send me everything because we want to get this up as soon as we can because we want everybody crossing their fingers for Tuesday.
Yeah, it's all of the team's going to be there. It's oversubscribed. So it's been oversubscribed at the moment. Obviously, the priority needs to go to the policymakers, stakeholders. Obviously, it needs to go to members of parliament. But I know we've been absolutely oversubscribed from frontline workers at charities that don't directly have anything to do with animal abuse. So I've got individuals that come from disabled charities, LGBTQ plus charities, a couple of charities work with HIV positive youth. They're all wanting to get involved. This intersectionality is just spread, and it's great that it's far and wide, and it's amazing to see people are joining the dots. That's exactly what it's all about.
Yep. Why do pets matter? Because they Roger Karras said this usually before every Westminster dog show. He said, dogs may not be our whole life, but they make our lives whole.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, I can't remember who was it that said, if you haven't loved an animal, you haven't truly loved.
Yeah. Because I mean, the unconditional love that they give, I mean, there are so many, and one never replaces another. However, the
No,
adventure, I always write that to people when they lose a pet. I say, this is the give you love and strength, but I don't think any of us would have given up this adventure to miss this.
no, it's
Hopefully, yeah, hopefully your next adventure will be just as wonderful, because, you
yeah,
know, our lives are enhanced so much more. Christina, I can't wait to hear that Ruby's Law is passed.
yeah,
And I can't wait to see you again. And until next
yeah.
time, this is Deborah Hamilton, Hamilton Law and Mediation and the Why Do Pets Matter podcast. Please like us. Please share this. Spread the word about Ruby's Law.
Absolutely.
And until next time, kiss your pets.